Good morning, everybody. Today is Wednesday, April 20th. It's currently 9:49 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. My name is Stella. Today, we're going to be hosting episode 6 of the Mercuranians Podcast. How are you today, Cam?
I'm doing good. Excited on this Wednesday morning to talk about the Goddess Asteroids with you. So, I don't know. I feel like it's especially relevant that we're talking about them today because Juno, one of the Goddess Asteroids, is changing signs today. She's moving from Aquarius to Pisces, so that's really exciting. What are your thoughts on Juno today?
I just think that that's such a nice transition that we're going to have. We'll get into her mythology a little bit more, but she's had to pass right over Saturn,
Mhm.
and that wasn't fun for her, I'm sure of it. And
Yeah.
so not only is she no longer going to be in Saturn's sign, but she's no longer going to be in close proximity to Saturn.
Mhm.
So there might be more comfort within relationships just overall.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's almost more comfortable. It might not be, it's like the difference between the pressure and dryness that's going on with Aquarius
Mhm.
versus the dreamy, moist realm of Pisces.
Yeah.
um,
Another interesting transit though this weekend that you told me about. Do you want to talk about that? Because that blew my mind.
Yes. Okay. So this weekend we had a Mercuranian conjunction.
Yes.
Um, it was April 17th. Uranus is in Taurus. Mercury caught right up. It was short lived because Mercury is flying on by right now.
Hmm.
But we on that day, um, I like to believe that on that day, they decided that they were going to be sending a probe out to Uranus. I don't actually know if it was on Sunday, but they announced it yesterday.
Hmm.
So, regardless of if that decision was made final this
Right.
weekend
The
or
talks
not,
were happening just days before, 2 days.
yeah, like we know it was a topic of conversation.
Right.
I think it's super cool. We're going to learn so much about the planet Uranus. We
I
really don't know
know.
very much about him right now.
And it's just so clear, as Mercury transits Uranus, the announcement of the information to the world, it's so Mercurian, the
Yeah,
whole thing. And it happened literally 2 days after. So yeah,
right, right.
super cool.
Yeah, definitely. I loved hearing about that.
Mm, nice.
But
Well, yeah. So, do you want to talk a little bit about the goddess asteroids and maybe just kind of introduce them and we can
yeah,
kind of talk
definitely.
about their backstory a bit?
Yeah. So the goddess asteroids, also referred to as the four major feminines sometimes, or the asteroid goddesses, are there's going to be Ceres, Pallas, Juno, and Vesta. And these four asteroids can be said to represent pieces of the feminine outside of those typical archetypes that come with the moon and Venus.
Hmm.
And so in Western astrology, there has been a severe dominance of male and masculine archetypes. Only the moon and Venus, between all the way out from the sun down to Pluto now. There were only those two feminine energies. And so by including and incorporating these four feminine energies, this divine feminine energy, we see that step up and that more of a balance into more femininity.
Hmm. And just as you know, with the kind of awakening of the outer planets that we talked about in the outer planets episode, the discovery and integration of the goddess asteroids into astrology also coincided with the social awakening of those realms of human consciousness in terms of representing, honoring, and giving light and attention to those feminine archetypes of the healer, the nurturer, the mother, the daughter, the partner. All of those things are being projected in a completely different light since the awakening of these asteroids in an more I guess basic level when they were first just discovered astronomically, like in the 1800s. Then things kind of started moving and shaking. But this, when we saw the integration of like the use of these asteroids in astrological interpretation coming from the work of Eleanor Bach and Demetra George in the 1970s and 1980s, that was like when we really saw this full-fledged movement for women's empowerment and women's rights.
Yeah. And the synchronicity with their discovery, and not just their discovery, but their application and respect and use and stuff like that, their recognition.
Right.
That especially ties in with these like surpluses of women's rights movements, not only within America, but around the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a demand for the recognition of female consciousness, not just for men to recognize and honor women in that way, but also for men to not project their own feminine insecurities onto women. That kind of shift is equally what's happening here too. So there's a balancing out in a way between both genders that we're able to kind of access with these asteroids.
Yeah. And there's this degree like where men have to recognize their own femininity,
Right.
and like start to abandon their toxic masculinity and stuff like that. And that is a process that is still going on today. That shift is still slowly but surely occurring in society. But I know that you had some things you wanted to say about the asteroid belt and their placement in.
Yeah. No. So it's really interesting because where these asteroids are literally placed in our solar system, so between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter, we have the asteroid belt, which is where these four major asteroids are located. And basically, it serves as a bridge between, our personal and the transpersonal consciousness. Because, like as we talked about in our earlier episodes on the inner planets, which went up to Mars, and then the social planets, Jupiter and Saturn, the connection there, what bridges us, the individual, to our collective, our communities, our social groups, is literally that asteroid belt. So the archetypes that we find in astrology through the asteroids located here all have to do with the themes of personal integration into the collective, into human relationships, family relationships. All the asteroids are going to start telling us the stories that play out in our lives in terms of how we're interacting with other people, how we show up in our relationships, how we work with others. And so it's really important to kind of understand here that this is that bridge between the self and the other. And so when we look at that on the zodiacal wheel, starting from Aries, which begins at Mars by the rulership scheme, it's going to go all the way through the inner planets and the luminaries up until Scorpio, which is the next sign, and again ruled by Mars. And then after that, the last four signs of the zodiac, which are Sagittarius through Pisces, those four signs are only ruled by the outer planets, so the social planets, Jupiter and Saturn. So in a way, that really transformational step of Scorpio, which really represents kind of the death of the self, the death of the ego, and then Sagittarius being like the reintegration of the self with the others. That step along the way involves this process of encountering these asteroids.
Yeah, 100%. And when you take a look at the inner planets and their placement, and the fact that they're considered the inner or personal planets, even, then you take a look at the social planets, where you have this huge distance between the farthest inner and the closest outer or social planet.
Mm-hmm.
You've got that massive cleave. And so if your personal planets are going to be your person, the social planets are going to be the society you're in, the socialization you do, the people you're around. There's going to be this kind of middle period here. And we get that with the asteroid belt. And
Mm-hmm.
that might also include your direct community, people who you grow up with, people who've seen you for years and years out of your life, who've watched you age, They might be people you take care of, people you watch grow up. There's a degree of intimate community. There's still a little bit of privacy though. So it's not going to be like your husband that's going to, I mean, the husband in marriage does come up with this, but do you get what I'm saying on the degree of intimacy with these relationships?
Yeah, it's kind of like, I feel like they show us the whereas like our main planets are going to show the recurring overarching themes in our lives, the asteroids will kind of show up when we look at stories in our lives that will recur but on a smaller scale. So it's like, how are you interacting like with your teachers, or how do you show up like in your commitment to a project or something? That's going to kind of be what we explore with these four asteroids at least. So yeah, there's definitely a, you know, like you said, a more private in a way. It's more intimate because it's a, like, they're not as, you know, broad experiences. They're going to be a little bit more detailed than what we've talked about before, but they're extremely important and applicable to every realm of our chart. Everyone really needs to look at the goddess asteroids, I think.
Right. I agree with that
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, I
Mhm.
think that it's something you should seriously do if you have not yet.
You should
Um,
seriously do. And I think that's a good gateway into our first asteroid. Yeah, is there anything else you wanted to say before we start talking
um,
about Ceres?
I did just want to credit Demetra George, and I always forget her last name. It's Eleanor
Bach?
Bach. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, and Eleanor Bach. They have seriously pioneered a lot of the work on the asteroid goddesses.
Mhm.
Eleanor Bach ran into Demetra George at an astrology conference, gave her asteroid ephemeris, and was like, "I think that you should look at this."
Mhm.
And Demetra George was taken away, and she looked through
Oh, yeah.
thousands of charts to
Lots for sure.
um, ma- to work through this area of astrology. And I just think that those two powerful female figures in the astrological community should be credited for that, and it should be emphasized.
Yeah, totally.
And
And just like, you know, the work that Eleanor did to reach out to scientists and astronomers to be able to just track the data. And so, you know, she did the work to compile an ephemeris where we could kind of look at the, you know, zodiacal positions of the asteroids over time. And then, you know, after she had done that, Demetra's work and, you know, starting applying it into charts and understanding how the archetypes are playing out in real life, you know, so we just have to, you know, really look at and credit them for, you know, pioneering the field of research into the asteroids, because that just formed, you know, the basis for, I mean, how many asteroids now that people look at, like thousands and thousands of named asteroids. So this really became a pioneering work into a huge new field of astrology for sure.
yeah, yeah, and definitely, this is a humongous field of
Mhm.
astrology, asteroids and minor bodies. And there are some like debates on the relevancy of them and their prevalence and how many you should use. But I will say again that the asteroid goddesses, I think, are definitely something you should use. It's something I look into in almost every reading. Even if I don't explicitly discuss it with a client, it's something that I take note of.
Mhm. And they're huge too.
They're huge, yeah. Ceres is the largest asteroid.
Mhm.
That's why she was the first one discovered. She is the biggest asteroid in that belt.
Mhm.
She's like less than 100 kilometers smaller than Pluto. Like, Pluto gets all of this hype and all of this recognition. So, if we're talking about any idea of physical transmission of energy, if you subscribe to that branch of thought, like under astrology, that it's a causational relationship, and that there's something physical there. Ceres size should be enough to convince you that she's influential.
Right.
And she also is heavier than Pluto.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, for me personally, like you said, even if I don't discuss them, like I definitely look at them, because the thing with asteroids, I feel like the charts are always going to contain all of the information like in a fractal. So you can really just look at the 7 planets and go really deep with them if you really sit with it and work with like the traditional techniques enough. But you can also get the same answers from the asteroids. And so at least in the case of these 4, I think they can point to some of those specific factors really quickly. So just starting to like look at Ceres and Pallas and, Juno and Vesta in people's charts, I think is an easy way to start like really working with some new bodies, and you'll see them show up. Like it will be loud. It will be very clear looking at them.
Yeah, definitely. Um, did you want to kind of bridge into Ceres now?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay. So Ceres was discovered on January 1st, the new year in 1801. As I said before, she is the biggest, heaviest asteroid. Mythologically, she was also known as Demeter for Greek mythology, in case that helps anybody follow. She was the sister of Jupiter or Zeus, and her daughter was Persephone or
Prosperina, I think.
I
Hold on,
always
I'm actually not sure. Let me double check. It's one of those.
I always mess that up. But she was the mother to
You're right. It's Proserpina. Yeah.
Proserpina. Okay.
Yeah.
She was the mother to Proserpina, also known as Persephone, who gets swept up and taken by Hades or Pluto every winter. So, because of this abduction of her daughter, and because of her power over the crop and the harvest, every year, as a result of her grief and loss, all of the plants are said to die. And so all of the life is going to vanish from the earth, and humans don't have food to eat, they don't have food to grow. And so that ties into a lot of different themes with her astrological interpretation and application.
Yeah. I think when we start looking at Ceres as, or at least Demeter as a lunar goddess, which she is, it really ties in a lot of the other themes that we'll be talking about here in terms of, how we talked about so much how the moon represents the body and the physical. And so Ceres is all about, the harvest, the food, the nourishment that we get from, our necessity of eating and drinking. And so Ceres speaking to like that baseline of needs that are just fundamental to our being as a human. Like the moon is the first planetary sphere after the earth. So like the first step after, coming down here is like, are you fed? Are you healthy? Are you physically nourished with resources? Do you have a roof over your head? All those basic lunar concerns are going to all kind of tie into what Ceres is showing us in our chart. So it's really about that fundamental aspect of how we are taking care of ourselves, how we were taken care of, and, relationship to our caretakers. And so, yeah, that's all there.
Yeah, 100%. While you were talking about that and the lunar sphere and the moon just being this like baseline, made me think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Oh, yeah.
For anyone unfamiliar, it's a triangle with five different categories of needs. And the base need is going to be your physiological needs. So, are you fed? Are you sleeping? And are you warm? Things like that. Then above that, it's going to be your safety needs. Do you feel safe? Are you living in a constant state of stress and anxiety? Do you feel secure? Do you have resources? And I think that those two levels are definitely Ceres. Like,
yeah,
are you fed and are you protected? Like, do you have enough to make ends meet? 100% are Ceres.
yeah.
And
I was just gonna say, I'm really glad you brought that up. That's a great analogy to this whole kind of, level of, that lunar concept here.
thanks. Yeah, I might have to incorporate that with some of the others. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, we can definitely see where that goes.
Yeah. So Ceres in a chart can really talk to your dynamics with parental figures in your life. particularly your mother especially tends to be one that comes up a bit more. It's a little bit clearer with Ceres than the
Mhm.
father. It can speak on your relationship with self-care and self-nurturing, eating habits, anything like that, whether it's healthy, unhealthy, enough, not enough, too much. Um, and it can also speak to how you nurture and how you handle parental responsibilities. Sometimes series placement can show you where, did you have to take care of your siblings? Were you the oldest sibling? Did you have that responsibility?
Mhm.
When you get older, are you going to be taking care of your mother? That can come with series placement and interpretation in a chart.
Yeah, I mean, all of those really important familial ties that we have are going to weave into Ceres' story in our chart. But like you said, especially the maternal relationship, because Ceres mythology is so intrinsically linked to the story of Ceres and Persephone and Pluto, this whole dynamic of protection and that motherly care for her daughter. Um, if Ceres is going to be afflicted in our chart or placed in a negative way, that can show us that there's going to be some kind of dynamic or mythology playing out in your life related to that conflict between not receiving the nurturing side of, from your mother or from a parent, or whatever was kind of whatever you endured as a child, that's going to continue to play out until it's healed in that way. So those themes will play out into your adult life in terms of how you are taking care of yourself and being responsible for your own health and wellness. And then that will, it just is generational. It will keep playing on to your children until, that becomes healed. So it's always playing on a lot of different layers here.
Yeah, exactly. As you were saying, it's definitely cyclical.
Mm-hmm.
I think that series does have a lot to do with just cycles of loss and return,
Mm-hmm.
um, being disappointed and coming back from that, or feeling maltreated and having to heal yourself from that. That can come with series, especially. I think that that can also kind of tie into some themes that we have with Juno. But if we're talking about this actual recurring theme, if you think about the pattern of Ceres and Proserpina, with Proserpina being swept up every year, and that's why we have winter every single year, you have this kind of redundancy and this recurrence that
Mm-hmm.
comes with Ceres. And she travels almost as fast as Mercury, just under 2 degrees. Sorry, not 2 degrees, just under a degree, about a day, maybe every two, depending on how fast she's moving.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so series is very,
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot woven into it, because I also wanted to highlight, like you said, our relationship to food, because Ceres, as goddess of the grain and the harvest, is going to show us, our relationship to how we eat, our eating habits, potential eating disorders. Those are going to show up here as well.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Also, its house sign placement can really speak to the feelings of nurturing that you received from your parents. So, how they showed you affection.
Mm-hmm.
I actually know three people, Ceres and Capricorn. Two of them have it direct, one of them has it retrograde. The
Mm-hmm.
two with it direct, their mother and one of them father also, their parents just have seriously financially and materially like spoiled them, and they haven't had a hard time admitting it because they have been given really, really nice, really beautiful things materially. But then my friend who has it retrograde,
In
he,
Capricorn still.
yes, in Capricorn. So all three of these people have Ceres in Capricorn in their second house natally.
Oh, the second house of, yeah, finances, possessions,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. And so their parents bought them lots of things, and that was one of the main ways of showing them their affection. But then my friend who had Ceres retrograde, he never got any other kind of affection from his mother. She never hugged him. She never spent time with him. She never even really sat down and talked to him. And so, yeah, so there you can kind of see with that example the theme at play here.
Mhm. Yeah, the last point that I kind of had about Ceres was just also, it represents children too. So, if you are taking on the role of a parent in this lifetime, whether that's, biological children, or if you're a teacher and you work with children, or if you are a social worker and, you work with families, all of these, all of those kinds of connections are going to show up in your chart. So, like I was looking through, just in prepping for this episode, so many charts of school teachers, elementary school teachers, high school teachers, all had these extremely exact Ceres aspects to their sun. I saw like 3 different English teachers, and this was just me looking really quickly. I saw 3 right away that all had Ceres exactly opposite their sun. I saw one example of a preschool teacher who had Ceres conjoined to her Mercury in Cancer. And so Mercury is also another archetype of children. And in Cancer, which is the theme of protection and caretaking and watching over, and the mother archetype, Ceres conjunct Mercury in Cancer, she's a preschool teacher. And it was also exactly in a trine to her Jupiter to the degree. So that just, magnifies and expands the relevance of that theme in her life. A couple of other examples were like, a second grade teacher, she had Ceres in an exact trine to her north node. And they were in Gemini and Aquarius, which is about the exchange of knowledge and teaching and information. And so she's a, second grade teacher imparting so much knowledge to these young children. But I could keep going here. I mean, there's a lot of sun conjoined Ceres too, as well. I saw that more with nurses and caretakers as well. Like for instance, my grandmother, she had sun conjunct Ceres in Scorpio, and she was the single mother of a large family of children, and she was also a licensed practical nurse. She wasn't like a room nurse, like an RN, but she like worked in a hospital her whole life, and she worked extremely hard to provide as a single mother for like a family of 7. And so that totally speaks to, I think, like this scorpionic, like trudging through the hard work and the strength to get through those obstacles too.
Yeah, definitely. That's amazing. Yeah, that's a really good example. And something else about Ceres, just in general, is that Ceres Pluto aspects are going to be super, 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 super important just because of the mythology behind that. And it is so stark. It is so relevant in the native's life too. It's always something super, super transformational. As cliche as that word is when discussing Pluto, the Ceres aspect of it really speaks on that just major perspective change, shift, kind of a break in trust in a lot of cases, too.
Yeah, I think if you have an aspect between Ceres and Pluto in your chart, whether it's a conjunction or a square or opposition, if it's exact, like within, a trine, if it's within 2 or 3 degrees, it's just going to be magnified more than Ceres aspects to other planets because of just how those 2 bodies work together. So definitely look out for those aspects as well. And I
Right.
think we'll have some examples later on when we do some other charts that have a couple of other asteroids. So we'll talk a little bit more about Ceres Pluto.
Yeah, definitely. Did you want to open us with an example? Did you want me to open with a chart example?
Yeah, you can do another series example. I have a few more. So,
Okay. Okay.
mhm.
So, my example was Gordon Ramsay. I already said my example with the people with Ceres and Capricorn, but he has Ceres in Cancer in the first house, and I just think that really speaks to him. With Ceres having to do with food, 100%, cooking, eating, things like that, and then also he's great with kids. He loves kids and he's always very kind to them. He's great at entertaining them and keeping them entertained, and like they get so stressed and cry on his show, and he's so sweet and polite to them, and then like you put him in a room with adults and like idiot sandwich happens,
Yeah.
so
And he
yeah,
has kids too, doesn't he? I think he has a
yeah,
daughter.
yeah, I think he has 2 or 3 kids.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and he really loves them, and he takes really good care about them, and has talked about how spoiled they are, and he just can't say no to them. So I just thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, no, that's a great example. I think his chart also, if you take a look at it, once you see all the Scorpio, then you'll see the other half of the story there.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but yeah,
definitely.
no, that's a great series example. So one of my celebrity examples also has series in Cancer is Winston Churchill, who was known for successfully leading Britain through World War II. And, you know, this man fought to protect his home nation. So he had series in Cancer, which is about the protection and nurturing and caretaking of the home. And he had it up in the 10th house, which means he's being known for the way that he was protecting his home, which was literally his entire nation. So I thought that was a really interesting example too. Um, Another interesting series example I had was Albert Hoffman, who was the scientist who synthesized LSD. He had series in Pisces in the 10th house. So once again, 10th house is career, what you're known for. Um, and so series in Pisces being nurturing through like spiritual healing or mystical experiences or like revelations from, you know, altered states of consciousness. And so he synthesized, you know, this compound which for better or for worse allows access into another realm of awareness and understanding. And, you know, that brought on a whole revolution of consciousness into, you know, the 60s and 70s. And he's also a great example for a few other asteroids, which we'll talk about later. But yeah, I think Ceres in Pisces is just really stark statement about what he did to, in terms of like what he nurtured, right? Like consciousness. It's a Pisces. It's like awareness.
Right. And if I'm remembering correctly, a lot of the work that he was doing in the lab was with the intent of creating molecules that could help people.
Right.
Like he wasn't trying to synthesize a drug to party and have fun with. Like that wasn't really his intent. It
Mm.
was, I'm trying to find something and make something that can help people.
Yeah, like just that huge collective vision that Pisces has.
Yeah.
It's so clearly written there.
Uh-huh. Dreamers.
um, yeah, and then like two other ones I had really quickly too was from just personal charts, a hairstylist. She has Venus conjunct Ceres in Libra. So Venus in Libra being beauty and Ceres being like this nurturing, caretaking, you know, like aspect of it where she's doing it for a living. It's like she's caring for hair, beauty, and styling, and you know, making people feel good. That's her career. And so she had this amazing like exact conjunction between Ceres and in Libra conjunct Venus in Libra, which is Venus's own sign. And then also another chart, they had Ceres.
Really quickly, I did want to just interject. My mother is also a hairstylist, and she absolutely loves what she does because she gets to help people love themselves. And so, like, there's that degree of like nurture and care that comes with it.
Yeah. Where's her series?
Her series is in Aries in the fifth.
Huh. Well, fifth house,
Yeah,
like
and
creations.
it opposes almost exactly her, it's almost exactly conjunct her IC. So it almost exactly opposes her MC, which is in Libra.
Okay, yeah. No,
Mhm.
that's super interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the last example I just had was this woman who's a life coach and spiritual healer. She has Ceres conjunct Saturn in Pisces. So this like idea of like integrating life experience into you know, nurturing that and helping people heal from that. It was also up in her 10th house. So it's like her work, her line of work is Saturn, like our difficult experiences, and then Ceres, like healing and mending and nurturing that in Pisces, having this broader perspective to, achieve a vision and manifest a goal. Like that was all her work as like a manifestation life coach. So
Yeah, that's great. That I really like that example too, because you can see that parallel there with Albert Hoffman. That's his name, right? Albert.
yeah.
Yeah. You can kind of see that parallel there with Hoffman
Hmm.
and that spiritual healing.
Hmm.
So, speaking of spiritual healing, did you kind of want to bridge into the spiritual warrior and
Sure.
father of Pallas?
Yeah.
Awesome. Did you want to introduce us or do you want me to do it?
You can go right ahead.
All right. So, Pallas, also known as Pallas Athene or Athena, was discovered on March 28th, 1802. So, about a year, give a little, after Ceres was discovered. She is associated with, as I said, the warrior goddess Athena. And so, if you don't know the mythology of Athena or Pallas, born from Zeus or Jupiter, with an axe from the skull. And so he had this like splitting migraine, and so do you know who it was? Who was handed the axe to split open his
I
head?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Um, hands somebody an axe, says, break my head open, gets his head broken open, and outbursts Athena or Pallas. Other stories have the thigh also, but there's also other deities who are tied with that. But the whole idea with her coming from his head is that she's just brilliant. She's wise, she's knowledgeable, she's independent. She has a lot of natural gifts. She has a lot of natural strength and power.
Mhm.
She's very much your creative thinking and creative passions and expressions.
Yeah, so Pallas is a really interesting energy for sure, because there's this whole Venusian component to Athena, but it's like this Venus like with Mars, because she's a beautiful goddess of wisdom and beauty, but also she's a warrior. She's like a battle queen of strategy and intellect, and so there's this melding between both of those energies that Pallas has here. And I think in her discovery chart, actually, the sun was in Aries when she was discovered. So Pallas is, we kind of talked about this a little bit with the outer planets, but we do have discovery dates for the asteroids too. So, Pallas's sun and Venus being in Aries, it's kind of like this really bold expression of like this, it's Mars, it's intensity, it's this warrior queen, but it's also extremely intellectual. The moon was in Capricorn when she was born. So there's this other theme of like having being able to really integrate your ideas into something. And so I really think Pallas in our charts shows us how we not just our creative intellect, but what we're here to use our creative intelligence to do or manifest in our lives on Earth. So like I feel like when I look at Pallas in a chart, it's not just necessarily what is like the creative impulse towards, but like it's really going to show us what is being applied to in your life. um so I don't know what you think about that,
I,
because
I agree with that 100%. We actually like wrote these independently, and I have creative thinking and expression and creative force. So I agree with that 100%. There's this degree of power that comes with
mm,
Pallas and the energy of Pallas. I always imagine her to be a woman who is absolutely beautiful. She was a virgin goddess.
mhm.
Um, and that was 100% by choice. Just, I don't want men to touch me, was kind of the energy with that. So you definitely get this almost dissonant feeling if you were to imagine talking to her, because it's somebody so smart, it's somebody so beautiful, so powerful, and so wise. They can really just see right through you. So like if you were to try and sit down and have a conversation with a human, not even a goddess, but just a human who really had that Pallas energy, that Athenian energy, you would be very intimidated by her. She's very intimidating.
Mhm.
And it doesn't have the air of ego with it, just inherently, but it is profound self-respect and self-respect that is earned.
Hmm.
And so if you look at that and apply that kind of idea to your chart, you can ask the question of, what am I so passionate about? I know so much about, and what am I confident in my ability to talk about, to teach about, to learn more about and discuss?
Yeah. I think, and when we talked about Venus a little bit, we mentioned how her different phases as a morning or evening star, she's associated with different goddesses. And so as an evening star, she's more of the Aphrodite archetype, the like, just really, artistic and all about beauty and the senses and pleasure. Whereas the morning star Venus as Athena is really strongly, manifesting as this desire for equality, because when we look at Venus's two signs, her evening star would correspond with Taurus, which is, an earth sign about physical pleasure. And then Libra, on the other hand, we have associated with Pallas, and that's about justice and equality and fairness. And so her standing up in a way, as an archetype for female equality and justice between men and women, I think is a relevant theme here as well. But I feel like the creative side of Pallas is really, it's not like Venus, where Venus, I feel like in a play, like Venus would just be like the front, like main character on the stage, but like Pallas is like all of the work that's done behind the scenes, like the set design, the costume design, the lighting. That's where like Pallas's creative intellect is kind of like on this different flavor than Venus, I feel like.
I agree. And I think that Pallas's wisdom and intellect is a force to be reckoned with.
Mhm.
It is just powerful in nature. Think about all of the effort. If Venus is the one painting the stage decorations for a play, we'll uphold that analogy. Pallas is the one deciding where they're going to go, what the tech needs to do, what lights need to be present, what color paints Venus is using,
Mhm.
when the props are going to be moved on and off of the stage,
Mhm.
when the lines are going to be set, and all of those other things. So there's this depth to it and
Mhm.
this passion to it that you don't always just inherently have with Venus.
Yeah.
There's that balance and that blend of almost Martian energy, that force and power and passion for
Mhm.
learning and creating.
Right. Yeah. It's really, like you said, it's a creative force to be reckoned with. It's going to be expressed.
Yeah.
So, in our charts, we're going to see how we apply that creative side of our intellect to our our work, or what we're here to do, or our passions, or our hobbies. So, like for instance, um, I have a chart example of a woman who, on top of her Virgo stellium, which Virgo, is all about nitty gritty details, the analytical mind, paying attention to, detail, literally, she had a Pallas exactly at 0 degrees of Virgo. So if on top of, I think having like 3 or 4 other planets in Virgo, just seeing her Pallas there at 0 Virgo just was such a clear indicator of what this woman was doing. And she was literally a quality control specialist. Her job was to pay attention to literally managing and overseeing an entire assembly line and making sure that every little detail of the job was perfect. And I think just seeing her Pallas at 0 Virgo was like an amazing example of how that creative intellect's applied to like the work that we do.
I agree 100%. That is super cool. I see, I just, astrology is so cool. It's just so cool.
I know.
Did you have any other examples?
I do have some Pallas examples. Yeah. Yeah. Another example I had was a man who had Pallas conjunct Saturn in Capricorn. So, okay, Pallas of this creative intelligence, being conjoined to Saturn about the past, tradition, and structure. And in Capricorn, which is Saturn's own sign, he sold antiques and had a massive antique store. And so Pallas and Saturn being together shows this like appreciation for like an antique or vintage style, and an interest in like that creative flair of antique things. And then in Capricorn, it was his work, it was what he did. He was literally had an antique store. Another one I thought was really interesting, Miley Cyrus had a Venus Pallas conjunction in Capricorn. So a major blending of those creative energies between Venus and Pallas. And then in Capricorn, it's what she does for a living, being an artist. And then it was also in her 8th house. And so I think this tied into some of the maybe potentially self-destructive manifestations of this, being so involved in, I think a lot of artists can struggle with this, but using, substances to generate your, creativity can kind of go only so far in some cases. And I think straddling the line with that, especially like with her experimental work, that was just such a shock to the world when she came out with some of that. And she also has a Ceres Saturn conjunction on her MC, which I think also speaks to like the death of innocence, right? Because she was seen as this like child star, and then Ceres conjunct Saturn is like this total breaking the norm of what, this child star was supposed to look like. So she also had that asteroid on her MC, which was really interesting. Another one was Anne Frank, who had Pallas and Aries conjoined her MC to the degree. And, she was known for her diary that she wrote, her exposing her thoughts at their purest level. Pallas in Aries is going to just purely express its own creativity. And, her just writing in her journal, in her diary, her thoughts and her emotions and her feelings, that was what she was known for. It was conjoined to the degree of her midheaven. So I thought that was another really stark example of seeing how, our creative intelligence manifests as literally what we do, what we're known for. It's involved in, in this case, when it's in our 10th house, what we do for our work or what we're seen for. And so Anne Frank was another interesting example there.
Yeah, that is a great example. Offhand, one that I know, I had a client. He has Venus, Pallas, and Jupiter in his 9th house in Pisces. And he is so passionate about spiritual practices and spiritual endeavors. Actually, yes, 9th house. Whether it be quadrant or whole sign, it'll push some of the placements into the 8th, but so passionate about spirituality.
That could also still be relevant in the 8th too, though.
Yeah, I agree with the interest in the occult.
Mm-hmm.
And is just obsessed with learning and practicing and ritual work. And it is such a fiery and just rich devotion that he has. And that's something that we'll get into soon with devotion, because Vesta's also got something to say when it comes to that chart. But yeah, and I did also want to kind of mention Pallas can also highlight some less positive aspects of the human experience, specifically relationships with men, and not particularly familial relationships. So Pallas can indicate like aversion to men or negative experiences with men in some situations. So it's just also something to think about. That would come likely with like a blend of different factors in the chart.
Yeah, some really notable feminists, like for instance, Elizabeth Cady Stanton,
Yeah.
who ran the Seneca Falls Convention, which was like one of the first women's rights movements that started in the 1800s. And also Valerie Solanas, who was a radical feminist in the 1900s. She was the woman who shot Andy Warhol. Both of them were really interesting examples of having Pallas in Libra, which is kind of like a sign that's a little bit associated with Pallas, like we talked about, and standing up for, women's rights and equality. And I think those were two really stark examples of seeing, how far they fought to stand up for women's rights.
Yeah, and that was a fight, and a brutal one too. Yeah, it wasn't just picket line protesting, it was dangerous.
Yeah, I had another Pallas Libra who, so in this case, this was Bob Marley, So Pallas in Libra, I mean, this man fought for equality and peace and harmony and, just fairness for everyone and everyone to just live in a peaceful way. And I think seeing his Pallas in Libra showing that he was applying his creative intelligence in his music and his message for fairness. So that was another interesting example there.
Right.
And did you have any other ones?
Not for Pallas specifically. I have some that involve other asteroids.
Okay. I just had two last quick ones for Pallas in Aquarius because I think this placement's really interesting too because Aquarius is so visionary, and so this combination of Pallas and Aquarius, these people just bring such really innovative insight into their line of work. And so Martin Luther King had Pallas in Aquarius in the 10th house. So this man fought for once again, it's fairness and equality too, but in this case, it was with this communal view, which is also what Aquarius is all about. And in his 10th house, this was what he was known for. Another example was Betsy Johnson, who had Pallas in Aquarius in the 10th house, and she was an extremely avant-garde fashion designer. She also has it conjoined Vesta in Aquarius in the 10th house. So just being known for super wacky, innovative, unexpected designs in her work, like having that Aquarian Pallas is just like getting sparked with, completely new and unexpected ideas. And in this case, her fashion and her creative design.
Yeah, that's great. Betsy Johnson. How fun is she? She does make such fabulous pieces. And they're very sometimes they can be a little tacky, but like I think that speaks to like the in your face, like boldened expression of Pallas,
Mm-hmm.
where it's just this very raw and like it can be more of like a stern energy, or it can be more of like a hello, like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
that's
she's like a double Leo or something too, though. So she has a lot of really
yeah.
expressive. She's really Leo Aqua on that axis for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. So that was pretty much all I had for Pallas.
Me too. I think we did her justice. You want to get into Juno?
Yeah.
Do you want to introduce us with this one, or do you want me to start us
You
off?
can go ahead.
All right. So Juno was discovered on September 1st, 1807. She was the third asteroid to be discovered. Juno was also known as Hera, being Jupiter or Zeus's wife. Anybody who knows about Zeus and mythology knows that Zeus was a little man whore, and he was not loyal. He was not faithful. He was not loyal, and he was not respectful. And so Juno or Hera had to deal with that and take that disrespect. And so she was an officiator of marriage in the courts, not and the courts, in the courts. And Juno is also going to be a protector of all women. So she was a very matriarchal figure and just powerful matriarch.
Yeah. I think she stands for the disenfranchised and the disempowered in a lot of ways because what Juno did, she didn't actually retaliate against Zeus by being unfaithful to him. She did get back at him. She did not, stay silent. She definitely found her ways to try and, manipulate and undermine Zeus too, which, she, stood up for herself, but she never actually went to the level of being unfaithful to him, even though he did it to her repeatedly. So I think that says something really loud about what Juno is going to show us in our charts, because it's about our commitment and how we approach commitment in a relationship. So how we approach compatibility, how we deal with power struggles in relationships, and also the issue of infidelity, or I guess how you express your commitment to a partner just in its most general sense. Like Juno and Sagittarius, there's so much along for freedom with that sign, with that placement, where they might not want to commit to marriage and would rather just be in a more casual friendship with someone, in a close way. Whereas, Juno and Libra, those people are looking for really deep partnership and connection and balance in the relationship. Juno and Aries.
I was going to
Sorry.
say, and Scorpio basically just wants to devour their partner and live inside their skin.
Yeah.
But only if the partner meets like a list of like perfect traits. Sorry.
No, that's all. That's great. Juno and Gemini, they might struggle, falling in love with too many people, or not. Sorry.
I actually had an example of Juno and Gemini.
Oh, really? Yeah. Here, tell us about it.
I did want to talk a little bit more about her mythos, though.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
First, yeah. I mean, if you wanted to, you can finish saying what you were saying, though.
I mean, I think just, seeing her as a figure for disempowered people in general is also important, because it's going to give us a clue into our relationship. And, some people say like our soulmate, or, I wouldn't necessarily say that in the sense of like it's going to be like the most important relationship, but it's going to show a theme of our really important contracts with relationships with other people, whether it's a friendship or a relationship or a business partnership. It's going to be about how we approach commitment in one-on-one relationships, really.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and it doesn't have to be romantic, right?
Right.
Yeah, it could be a business partner, it could be a super close friend, something like that. I feel like Juno can kind of concern your boundaries, privacy, intimacy, any kind of power dynamic within those relationships. I think it can also really speak to your loyalty and commitment, of course. And the thing about commitment is that I feel like that word, when in its association with Juno, that can even be taken out of a partnering context, where your commitments, and when you commit to something, do you just wholly devote yourself to it? Do you incorporate it into your schedule? Is it something more rigid? You know what I'm saying? Do you have a hard time going back on your commitments and things like that? Or do you have a bad habit of breaking every commitment you make? So I feel like that can kind of come to light with Juno. But then also jealousy, and like where you need to be more self-aware in a relationship, because part of the thing here, we've got this theme with Juno, is that she was disrespecting herself in a lot of ways and neglecting her own emotional well-being by staying committed and in a marriage with Zeus. He was harming her and he was breaking her heart over and over again.
Yeah.
And instead of removing herself from the equation, she upheld her commitment and would take those emotions out on the women that he was having affairs with. Not him, never really did anything to Zeus, or Jupiter, but would sit there and like disconfigure these women and like their children, and would like kill people, imprison them, stuff like that. And so when you are in a relationship with somebody, do you lash out at your friends? Like if you had a boyfriend who cheated on you, would you just leave, or would you take it out on the woman? These are questions that can be answered by Juno. What are your weak points in your relationships? Are you neglecting your own needs? Are you catering to your partner too much? Are you expecting your partner to cater to you? I feel like these, even the less pretty aspects of commitment and one-on-one relationships, can really come to light with Juno.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a lot of words.
No, it's all good. So did you have a Juno example you want to talk about?
You didn't have anything else to say about Juno?
I think we covered it.
Oh, I could still talk about Juno.
Really?
Yeah. Well, because also like your friends too, like when you get into a relationship, are you going to neglect your friendships? You know, like,
Mhm.
how do you treat commitment with another person? And how does that commitment to another impact your self-respect, your self-esteem, your boundaries, your other commitments, your other responsibilities? Are they going to kind of take priority? And there's a million different things.
Mhm.
So yeah, that was, I guess I was done with Juno
Okay.
too. um she's also referred to as, she's often also kind of the female counterpart to Pluto. That comes up a bit.
Hmm. Yeah, we didn't talk about some of the other connections there, but yes, Juno can definitely be seen as a Plutonian archetype, in the feminine polarity. Um, and I think with Ceres, just to kind of pull it full circle to mention the other ones, Ceres was associated with Jupiter because we have Jupiter is like the sky father and Ceres is like the earth mother. So there's this nurturing that kind of comes from both of those. Whereas Jupiter is going to like kind of nourish our mind and our spirit. Ceres is about nourishing our body and our physicals, and she plays into that psychological level as well. But I think at the heart of Ceres, it stems from, what's physically happening in our environment that then influences our mind. And then also Pallas, I believe, is the feminine counterpart to Uranus. So
Mhm.
that's a really amazing connection too, to see how, Uranus being that spark of insight. And I feel like Pallas is the feminine counterpart, is like that insight applied to something in our lives.
Yeah, Pallas is brilliant.
Hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So did you have some Juno examples you want to talk about?
I was gonna save them until the end.
Okay, that's fine. I
Yeah.
just have two I was going to talk about for this one.
Shoot, let's hear them.
All right. So Nick Cannon has Juno conjoined to his Saturn in Libra. So Juno Saturn, that automatically shows us, okay, there's a really powerful dynamic going on in the relationship, themes of, control, restriction, but it's in Libra. So it's about, working through that power imbalance to find equality on both sides. And this man was known for his massively publicized marriage and divorce to Mariah Carey, who was an Aries. So it's this give and take, Aries Libra, because Nick Cannon was also a sun and moon in Libra. So this man was like super Libra, in addition to this exact Juno Saturn conjunction. And actually, his Juno Saturn is almost exactly opposite to her sun in Aries. And then she has also Venus conjunct Saturn in Aries, exactly opposite to his Lilith Pluto conjunction. So they just have this really powerful synastry going on between power and control and the other versus the self. And you can see how much that marriage kind of blew up there. The other example I had for Juno was Joe DiMaggio, who had Juno conjunct his MC. So, okay, being known for the relationship, being known for the partner, he was married to Marilyn Monroe. And this asteroid was literally on the degree of his midheaven. So you can see how this asteroid, Juno, in this case, it was in Virgo, played out in representing the publicity he got for his relationship and marriage to Marilyn Monroe.
Mm-hmm. That's great. That is very fascinating.
So yeah,
Mhm.
and I guess that brings us to Miss Vesta,
Yes.
Hestia.
Yes. Oh, did I say when Juno was discovered? Did I say that date?
I don't know if we did. Yeah, you did.
Yes, yes, I
September
did.
11th.
September 1st.
First, sorry, it was missing a
Yeah,
slash. It was 1801. Yeah.
yeah. So Vesta is our next asteroid. She was discovered on March 29th, 1807. This was actually 1 day and 5 years after Pallas's discovery. Just an interesting synchronicity there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Vesta, also known as Hestia for Greek mythology, is going to be goddess of the hearth, hospitality. Did I say that right? Hearth?
Yes.
I
Yep.
hate I hate that word. Anyways, she's going to rule over home and vitality and connections with the earth. So during the winter, all of the villages would have to devote themselves to Vesta in a lot of ways by keeping the hearth alive and keeping the fire alive.
Mhm.
And this would help maintain life within the city. If the fire goes out, everybody's going to freeze. And so this was a very ritualistic practice, and Vesta was connected with virgin goddesses.
Mhm. Yeah, so like in Rome, the Vestal virgins kept watch over the Vestal flame in the temple, and made sure that it never went out. So Vesta has this quality of like this kind of ritualistic connection and devotion to like something higher than ourselves, but also it's about purity, simplicity, chastity, um, but also it can be about kind of empowerment through sexuality too. It kind of works on both ends of that spectrum. But it's definitely, no matter what, it's about healing, our devotion to our own self-healing, our self-empowerment, our devotion to a cause, commitment to something. Vesta is going to correspond with Saturn here. So Saturn kind of, being that masculine force of keeping ourselves, on track and structured. Vesta is like the feminine archetype that is going along with that. So like I said, it's this devotion, this commitment, honoring a path and sticking to it. Really, that's kind of what's the biggest themes are here.
Yeah, yeah. And I wanted to kind of highlight the difference between commitment and devotion, because they are kind of I don't like to say birds of the same feather, because like it's feathers from the same bird is like what I'm
Yeah, no,
kind of.
they're similar, but they're different. I know where you're gonna go
Yeah.
with it. Yeah.
So yeah, because devotion is something that you do because you want to. There is no expectation, there
Mhm.
is no request, there's no really other party, anything like that. It's something that is totally autonomous and totally up to you. You
Mhm.
can be devoted to a commitment you made,
Mhm.
but you can be committed to something without being devoted to it.
Right. There's like a moral inner longing and calling for a devotion. And so Vesta
Yeah.
is, I think, really about finding devotion as opposed to Saturn, which you could maybe say is about finding commitment.
Right. And with Juno and the whole attitude around commitment with Juno. And
Mhm.
that ties in more with your personal relationships. Vesta is going to be very much your spiritual essence. And even if you're a atheist, anything like that, do you do yoga every day? Do you ground yourself? Do you, things like that? Do you have anything that you are devoted to? For some people, it's intellectual studies. They're just so in love and obsessed with learning.
Mhm.
For other
Yeah, Vesta, I
people,
think, is pretty scholarly too. It can show insight about, intellectual matters, especially like a Mercury ruled Vesta. Um, but also just like patterns in how you devote yourself to something. So Vesta in Aries, they want to work alone on a project. They want to be the leader or spearhead it. Vesta in Gemini needs communication and like being able to express your ideas and having mental stimulation to what you're working on. Vesta in Virgo is going to have this really detail oriented perfectionist streak, the need to work with delicacy and focus. And Vesta and Sag, they need to be devoted to a belief system. Vesta and Capricorn needs to be devoted to a project, to structure. So it's like you can see how this archetype of devotion is going to play out in 12 different ways based off of the sign that you have it in.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And, devotion to yourself too, Can you confidently say, I am mine before I am anyone else's?
Right.
Can you say that and mean it?
Mhm.
And so also Vesta kind of ties in with Ceres, because during the winter when Ceres like killed all the crop and just swathed the lands with winter, and Vesta is who they would pray to keep the people alive. And so there was this kind of seesaw that happens, this changing of the tide. And
Mhm.
so Vesta can also be that nurturing and in a sense, but not in such a gentle way. She's going to be a lot more raw and a lot more forward. and pretty eternal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So before we do any examples, I'm pretty much ready to dive into them. Is there anything else you want to talk about with Vesta?
I think that Vesta is pretty situated. I think it's worth noting that she was rarely expressed in any kind of human form. She was pretty consistently represented as a flame itself, and even in her glyph, she's a V with flame.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, and differs from the other goddess asteroids. There's something very unique about Vesta and her just lack of humanity, but not in like a cold and weird calculated way.
Mhm.
She might be a little bit stern, might be a little bit structured, but she is life force. She is not the expression of life force.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. So we had a handful of different chart examples that we both wanted to tackle. Do you want to just go back and forth?
Yeah, sure. The first one I had was this woman, she has Vesta conjoined Jupiter in Pisces in her ninth house of, spiritual matters. So she's a Reiki healer and a yoga teacher. So, I mean, Vesta, Jupiter in Pisces, this is all about, expanding your consciousness through devotion to the divine, really. And so that's her work.
Yeah, that's a great example. I wanted to mention Jackie Chan.
Mm.
Yes. So he has a Pallas Pluto conjunction. Mutual application because Pluto is retrograde. I'm sorry, that was totally wrong. I just read their things backwards. Not mutual application, but still, they're conjunct. Um, so he was, and it's in Leo. Juno is also right there. And
Mm.
then he's got Vesta in Aries in his 11th house. So his time is well rated. He's a double A. So yeah, he was an actor and fighter. Like lightning fast hands, was
Mhm.
renowned for being just this powerful martial artist. And
Mhm.
something about Pallas is very much martial arts. She was a warrior and a creator
Mhm.
and a creative. And so, them being in Leo, he was just absolutely revolutionary. And he was very much like a center of focus for a
Right.
lot of
Commanded attention to be
movies.
seen with it.
Yeah, yeah. And for tons and tons of films too. He was in so many movies. So yeah, I thought that was worth mentioning.
Yeah. Anne Frank also had Vesta conjoined to the degree to her Mercury in Gemini. So being devoted to her journal, her writing, this girl suffered so much, but her devotion to what her soul was here to do was to write. So Vesta conjoined to her Mercury in Gemini, her life's work was to document her feelings and her thoughts and her emotions in her diary. And so that was exactly what she did. And that's exactly what her Vesta conjoined her Mercury is showing us.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm.
I have here Jessica Lange. For anybody who does not know, she's one of the most decorated actresses
Yeah.
alive. Seriously, she has so many awards. But she's super popular right now with her role in American Horror Story. She's usually the mother or the an older woman who kind of has this power over the
I would say
cast.
she plays a very Vestan role because she's a very Saturnian figure, but it's very matriarchal too. So I feel like,
Really?
yeah.
Vesta? You don't
Yeah, I
think
feel
that?
like in the seasons, like she's always like she's a nun in Asylum,
Okay, I haven't
right?
seen Asylum.
Oh, well, in season 2, she's the nun that runs the asylum. And in season 3, she's the head witch of the coven. And in
Well,
season 4, she runs the freak show. I don't know. I feel like there's a commitment to her
I
goals.
do see what you're saying. She does have Vesta in her 5th house in Sagittarius.
Oh my gosh, there you go. Your 5th house of your creations and like
Yeah.
being an actress for that role.
Well,
Totally.
and so not even just that role there, but her just devotion to acting in general.
Mm,
Seriously, like if you look at her like resume or like list of just like everything she's been in, it is infinite. It
mm.
goes on forever, starring in like 3 or 4 different things at the same time. That is so hard. And she's done it for years.
She's
Her
amazing.
acting career is almost it's approaching 60 years old and she's in her 70s.
Mm,
So there's that. Also worth mentioning, Juno in Gemini in her 11th house. She's had 2 husbands and both of them have died. Her 7th house is ruled by Saturn also. Um, so that might just a little snippet there. But
mm,
she has had those 2 husbands, does not want to get married again. She
mm.
has casually mentioned being interested in dating, but has said explicitly that she does not want to be in a marriage
That's so
again.
fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like just
so with
Gemini, just the twins.
yeah, the
Yeah.
double-bodiedness. And then she also has a Ceres Pluto conjunction in her 1st house in Leo.
Mm,
I tried to find anything about her personal life that would really speak to this because that is so just prevalent. I
mhm.
could not find anything. It's really interesting how much of her home life is really kept secret. When you look up things about celebrities, you can usually find quite a bit about their childhood and things like that, but there's really not much information about her parents, only their occupations.
Mm.
But I think that that does just speak to her being such a powerful matriarch.
I mean,
Not
at least, oh, I'm sorry to interrupt. What were we gonna say?
I was going to say not only in American Horror Story, but just being such a renowned actress with such a powerful reputation.
Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna say the series Pluto is so loud in the roles that she plays. Like
Yeah,
they're all about nurturing the wounded, like Asylum. She's this mother of like all of these really mentally ill people. That's literally her role in the season. Every recurring season, she's always the mother of like wounded people. In season 1, she had a daughter with Down syndrome, and that was the whole struggle of the plot of that season. In season 3, she was the supreme of the coven and took in all these witches that were being persecuted. And in season 4, she was the mother of a freak show. She took care of all
right.
the outcasts. It's like Sirius Pluto is like she was this nurturing mother for all of them, and in really dire and like severe and violent situations. So I think that at least is really loud in the way it showed up in her career and what the act like the role she took on.
Yes, I agree. I agree
I was
100%.
also just going to mention the other series Pluto example that I had that I mentioned earlier was Orlando Bloom. So he had Ceres conjunct Pluto, and he initially believed that his biological father was his mother's husband. This was just a man that was actually not his actual biological father, and so the husband of his mother, this man died when he was 4. So you can see Ceres Pluto there, the loss or like the sweeping away of his father and the nurturer. But then when he was 13, he found out that that wasn't actually his biological father and that it was a family friend of his mother's. And so, I mean, this whole dynamic of Ceres and Pluto, of nurturing and death and loss and confusion and people leaving and it's someone else. And it's like that was so loud in his chart. So I thought that was another interesting Ceres Pluto example too.
Yeah, definitely. I meant to mention this earlier, but I'll slip it in now before I forget.
Yeah.
Um,
We're
but
throwing in all the other examples we didn't get to before.
right, there'll be some more examples following this, but um, I just wanted to mention topics of sex and with these asteroids
Mm,
because I hear and see a lot of things online about especially Vesta and especially Pallas
Mm.
being celibate and empowerment through celibacy and things like that. And sure, mythologically, those archetypes did have their power from celibacy, but at the same time, today, you can have empowerment by being a sexual person and taking control over your own sexual endeavors and exploring not only yourself, but your curiosities and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And I think that it just really speaks to the just the way that society has kind of treated women and their perceptions and attitudes towards sex. Because one of the only ways to be sexually empowered as a woman for so much of human history was just, or maybe not history, Western history, I won't say human, has been to deny men sex. And a lot of times that power was just taken from women. And so by taking the initiative and being sexually explorative, in a lot of ways you are being sexually empowered. So I think that is an important thing to say, because sexual empowerment does not equal chastity.
Yeah, I think I kind of mentioned that a little bit when we were talking about Vesta too, because it's not just purity. It's about, that is a path to, liberation and illumination for people to exploring that and kind of finding freedom through that. Um, but yeah, I think I had a couple more just super quick. Like Trump had Vesta in the eighth house, and Vesta also being associated, like we were just talking about, with um, sexual acts, but also sexual misdemeanor and misconduct. In this case, being in the eighth house of death and hidden things and um, abuse in a way. And so obviously he was really scrutinized for the public scandals that he had. I'm sure plenty of other politicians have some kind of eighth house Vesta or, similar 12th house, whatever it is. But that was just an example that I found for someone who, ended up being well known for an incident like that. And the last example I had was that I meant to mention earlier was Matt Damon, who had Pallas. This is a Pallas example. He had Pallas in Aquarius in the first house. And I think this really speaks to the role he played as the Martian um, in that movie, because I think he also has Neptune on his midheaven, like to the degree, um, which is all about, shooting into outer space. So I just thought that was another interesting Pallas example as well.
Yeah, that is a great Palace example.
Mhm. Oh, I have one more.
Go for it.
And today's his birthday, Napoleon III. So he had all four goddess asteroids in Aquarius in the first house. Um, and he led a super authoritarian government in France for through 20 years of like pretty much peace, but then he was overtaken by the Germans after that. So it's kind of interesting to see all four of these energies being expressed through Aquarius, Saturn's sign, which is all about this rulership and dominance and power. But that eventually went to his demise because he was overtaken by the Germans. So that was just another interesting example. And also that today's his birthday. So
Right, might as well mention them. Um, Part of the reason I also mentioned sex and these placements is because I wanted to discuss E.L. James' chart.
mm,
Um, she wrote 50 Shades of Grey, for anybody who does not know. We do not have a time for this chart, unfortunately, but we have a Ceres Pluto conjunction
it's
in
like exact, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Ceres Pluto exact conjunction in Virgo, right next to Juno, which is also 5 degrees away from Vesta. All three of these are in Virgo. And
Wow.
then we had Pallas over in Cancer. And so I just thought that was so marvelous because like we have this Ceres Pluto with like this very power dynamic
Mhm.
filled work,
Right.
and with Virgo it being a written piece and like a
Yeah,
book.
the Mercury component there.
Uh-huh, yeah. And there's Juno and Vesta there also. And so we have these themes of power dynamics, passion. With Pluto there's almost this
The whole other part of it, the whole, you
yeah,
know,
I don't want to say corrupt.
it's like
What
I mean, it's like the extent of what it was about though, you know, like the deep, dark, sexual aspect of the relationship.
yeah,
And especially in Virgo, the sign of, you know, purity and
yeah.
chastity, just bringing in this whole theme of, you know, innocence and power, or, you know, sexual corruption or abuse, or pushing the limits to the extremes, you know, like that's kind of, I feel like what I was getting off of her chart.
Yeah, very, very sexually deviant.
Mhm.
That is what I was looking for. And
Mhm.
I feel like you can really see that in her work with 50 Shades of Grey, especially with this Virgo. I'm like, I swear it's got to be in the third house. Like,
Yeah.
I think it's in the third house.
Mhm. And so the actual last example I have is Robert Blum, also had all four asteroids in Sagittarius. And he was a German politician and poet and revolutionist, and he opposed ethnocentrism, and his whole belief system was that no one nation should rule over anyone else. So all of those asteroids being in Sagittarius, he fought for freedom and independence and justice, and like, you know, no one being in control of anyone else. That's all of what Sag is about. And I think just seeing this conjunction of all four of these asteroids working towards that Sagittarian energy, you know, he was a publisher, and so he, you know, spread his knowledge and his views all over. And so yeah, I thought that was another interesting example.
That is a marvelous example.
Yeah.
And then my very, very last one, and
Mhm.
then we'll be able to wrap up, was Greta Thunberg. I just could
Oh,
not remember her name. I don't know. I just almost said George Clooney. um, yeah, so Greta Thunberg, for anyone who doesn't know, she is a young climate activist. She has a lot to say about today's politics, and she's really good at saying it.
Mhm.
And so she has Juno in Scorpio. Juno is said to light Scorpio. She has Juno in Scorpio, and she has a Pallas Uranus conjunction in Aquarius.
Mhm.
And I think that so loudly speaks to her passion about the universe and how known she is, also. I mean, not the universe, about the climate and the state of our climate and where it's going. She
Mhm.
is such a figurehead for that. And she's so passionate. And with it being an Aquarius and that humanitarian aspect and just wanting to reform and better and reinvent with Uranus there too, I
Mhm.
just really, really liked her chart. She's also got Ceres and Aries. So her care about, not even a desire to, but her just inherent
Right.
care for the world is very passionate.
Mhm.
And so I just really liked her chart.
Yeah.
And she also has Vesta in Libra. And
Mhm.
so we have that same kind of theme that you talked about earlier.
Yeah, devotion to fairness.
Uh-huh. And to justice. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Wow. Well, that was a lot of examples. That was a lot of amazing discussion. Yeah, I don't know how long this one ended up running, but I think this may be our longest episode. So if you're still listening here, thank you for sticking it out. That was a great conversation. I hope we did them justice. I think we covered a lot of the bases here. We couldn't cover everything. Um, but yeah, I'm really happy with how this episode turned out.
I am too. I think it was a really good episode. Shout out to the Goddess Asteroids.
Mm.
Shout out to
Shout out to
Demetra.
Juno today, changing sign.
Yes,
Mm,
yes, yes, yes. Shout out to Juno today with her sign change. Oh,
mm,
that's so fun.
yeah.
She's gonna be training me. Um, all right. So, great episode today. Tune
Yeah.
in for episodes next week. We are no longer uploading on Wednesdays. We are
Yes.
uploading on Sundays now.
Mm,
Get that Sunday.
yeah.
So, yes. Alrighty. Well,
Yeah. Well,
Mercuranians out. Happy
happy
stargazing.
stargazing. See you guys next week.